It was March 15th, 2025, when America launched extensive air and naval strikes against Yemen.
Targets.
According to U.S. Central Command, these attacks marked the beginning of a series of large-scale operations with the ultimate goal of restoring security to the Red Sea and stopping the Houthis' campaign of attacks on ships in the Red Sea. Soon after, these strikes became much more newsworthy, and after the leak of chat messages between U.S. security and military officials on Signal, a major scandal erupted. But an important question lingered beneath these leaked chats. What was America's real objective in starting this war? And why did this conflict suddenly end after just 51 days? In 2011, a wave of protests swept across Arab countries, what we came to know as the Arab Spring. One of the most extensive protests occurred in Yemen against dictator Ali Abdullah Saleh. After his removal, his deputy Mansour Hadi came to power as interim prime minister. Hadi was supposed to complete constitutional reforms during his tenure, but with the assassination of several Houthi leaders, who were among the most important opposition groups, and the failure to achieve constitutional reform, a new wave of conflicts began in 2014, this time against Mansour Hadi. Houthi forces, protesting the assassination of their leaders, moved from Sada toward Sana'a, Yemen's capital, and Mansour Hadi was placed under house arrest. The Houthis continued their advance, gradually entering southern Yemeni provinces like Taiz and Aden. However, during this period, Mansour Hadi managed to escape from Yemen and, despite his prime ministerial mandate not being renewed by parliament, requested foreign assistance and intervention. Saudi Arabia seized this important opportunity and formed a coalition to launch extensive attacks on its southern neighbor, Yemen. This war, despite costing over $320 billion and the deaths of approximately 250,000 people, failed to achieve Saudi Arabia's desired objectives. After a ceasefire in April 2022, most of northern Yemen remained under Houthi control, but Yemen was about to make headlines again. On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched a surprise operation against Israelis in response to decades of Palestinian territory occupation, and subsequently, Israel began an all-out war against Gaza. A few days later, Yahya Saree, spokesman for the Yemeni army, reacted to Israeli attacks by announcing that the country would consider any ship heading to Israel a legitimate target as long as attacks on Gaza continued, and their attacks would continue until Israeli strikes on Gaza stopped. The Houthis, given their control over Bab al-Mandab and the Red Sea, had effectively created a major challenge for Israel and its allies. These attacks primarily affected Israel's trade through the Port of Eilat, which handled about 30% of Israel's foreign trade, while the rest of Israel's maritime exchanges occurred through Haifa and its western ports. These attacks effectively forced ships to circumnavigate Africa to reach the Mediterranean, meaning approximately 6,000 additional nautical miles and over 3 weeks longer transit times. Shortly after, in September 2023, America, as Israel's primary ally, announced that Yemeni operations were threatening international shipping and launched Operation Prosperity Guardian, with the help of Britain, Australia, Canada, and Denmark to organize attacks against the Yemenis. However, these attacks did not end Houthi operations. Instead, for the first time since World War II, the U.S. Navy's fleet came under attack while in operational status. Reports emerged of missiles hitting U.S. forces and American ships, with some U.S. vessels withdrawing from the combat zone. The Yemenis, using a combination of drones, missiles, and naval mines, had made air defense extremely complicated for U.S. forces. Things became even more complex when Donald Trump took office.
What will we do with this moment? How will we be remembered?
Trump sought a decisive victory in the Yemen file, and unlike his efforts to create ceasefires and other global conflicts, this time he personally ordered an escalation of hostilities. On March 15th, America officially began a new round of attacks on Yemen,
The US has launched a new strike
against the Houthis in Yemen.
9 people have been killed
in the port city of Hodeida.
But contrary to Trump's predictions, these strikes did not lead to the surrender of Yemen's Houthi forces. The Houthis engaged with full force and repeatedly attacked U.S. ships, resulting in the loss of 3 American F-18 fighter jets, while 8 U.S. drones were also shot down by Yemeni air defenses during this conflict. But a bigger challenge than the losses of these drones and fighters lay ahead for America. Through multiple trials and errors in their attacks, Yemeni forces had managed to expose some operational bugs in the U.S. naval fleet. For example, ship defense systems had to be turned off when American fighter jets were taking off. The Yemenis, understanding this issue, concentrated their strikes during these time windows and managed to hit the U.S. naval fleet and disrupt ship defenses. The important issue was that at the height of tensions between Beijing and Washington, these bugs were being discovered right before Chinese eyes. China's only foreign military base in Djibouti is located precisely near the site of these clashes, and the continuation of these attacks could have provided important free intelligence to the Chinese about the strengths and weaknesses of the U.S. Navy. The force that is essentially America's most important arm in any potential confrontation with China. On the other hand, the Russians had also gained access to Port Sudan in the Red Sea through an agreement with Sudan, meaning that in addition to China, Russia was also closely gathering important intelligence. Furthermore, with Trump's Middle East trip approaching, the security of his travel was also under threat. During this period, although America struck multiple blows against Hodeida port and some Houthi infrastructure, it failed to eliminate important leaders or stop Houthi operations. But in the middle of this conflict, another important event occurred: the leak of chat messages from decision-makers involved in attacking Yemen on Signal. This incident turned into a scandal for those present in the group. But more important than the exchange of these messages on Signal and their public leak was part of the content of these chats, which showed that even within the Trump administration, there were deep ambiguities about operations in Yemen. Finally, with Oman's mediation, a ceasefire agreement between U.S. and Yemeni forces was announced on May 6th. This agreement only stipulated that Yemen would not attack American ships while America would stop its attacks. But the important point of this agreement was that the Houthis emphasized they would continue operations against Israel as long as the massacre in Gaza continued, attacks that have continued from the day of the agreement until today. We'll have to wait and see where the Yemen-Israel conflict will lead with America's withdrawal from the war.